No new news. It's the same thing we do every night. But for those of you, a reminder, it's next Monday. Next Monday in the evening in Blackrock Exam Center, which is a bit of a pain to get to. Look it up. It'll take you 45 minutes to an hour to get there from here, so be aware. MCQ, 15 questions, no negative marking, so you should answer everything. Guess if you don't know. On multiple choice, I know there's a fair number of Americans here, and like most Americans, I think me included, we did loads of multiple choice growing up. Irish people, not so much. So a few hints on how to do a multiple choice exam. First of all, there will be no time limit. So it says it's 1 hour, but in fact, I will let you stay until midnight. Right, so take a deep breath, like be cool. You take a nap, you can wake up, you can have another go. It's all fun. Right? So there's no time limit whatsoever. Now, that said, most of you will be done in 40 minutes or so, but some people will take 2 hours, 3 hours, absolutely fine, no problem. In the past, I've found no correlation between grades and people who do it fast or slow. It's just their fast or slowness. It doesn't have anything to do with their knowledge of the material. Some people stew over every little thing, and some people are, I gotta know it. And sometimes they do know it, right? So, if you're fast, you're fast. If you're slow, you're slow. You won't be allowed to leave for half an hour when we start. So even if you're done in 20 minutes, which some of you will be, you'll just have to sit tight until we do a bunch of administrative stuff in terms of keep your attendance and all that ridiculous stuff. But after half an hour or so, people who want to go can go. But plan on it being like an hour. Like vast majority of people will be done in an hour. So for planning your rides and stuff like that. Right? So it's 15 questions. There's loads of time. Many of the questions will be quite straightforward. Some of them will be less straightforward. One of the skills you have to sort of deal with is how to identify what he's on about when they ask a question. Right? And this is something you do by looking at questions. And so you have some questions on Brightspace. When you're taking the exam, typically what happens is it's written by someone who is at least purported to know economics. Right? That's me. And so it's easy for me to come up with the right answer because I've been doing this for 30 years. Usually I can come up with 1 or 2 reasonable, wrong answers, and then I'm grasping at straws. So usually, if you just keep your wits about you and sort of don't panic, even if you know nothing about economics, very often, very, very often, you can eliminate 1 or 2 of the answers just based on common sense or a vague knowledge of what's going on in the class. And you are meant to do that. Right? There's no partial credit, in a sense, for multiple choice. On the other hand, in terms of probability, there is. Right? If you can eliminate 1 or 2 bad answers, then you're guessing between 2 or 3 answers, and your odds are much better of getting the right one. And you can do that reliably. You can get a decent score, right, just by eliminating answers. And so it's not uncommon for the questions to have some really genuinely stupid answers there on the list, just because I couldn't come up with anything better. Right? And I can't be bothered to spend millions of hours on wrong answers. I'd much rather spend the time on right answers. So you should guess, but you should guess in a smart way. Go through, eliminate the ones that you think aren't there. Read all of the answers. This is actually very important. Read the question. Read it again. You got loads of time. Read it, think about it. And then eliminate anything you think is wrong. Read all of the answers, though, because we're looking for the best answer, not a right answer. Sometimes there is a right answer, but there is a better answer as well. If it's clearly better, you won't get credit for the other one. Now, sometimes I make a mistake and there's 2 genuinely equally decent answers depending on how you interpret the world, in which case we're going to have discussions after the exam, and you guys can make a case for that. So if on the day you see something and you don't understand the question, you have unfortunately 350 people, I can't answer questions on the day in the exam. I just can't. It turns into to a nightmare, people talking and looking at each other's papers and stuff. It's just not physically practical for me to be able to answer questions during the exam. So if something's wrong with the exam, if there's something that doesn't make any sense on the exam, do the best you can. You're going to get to keep the question. You're going to be able to keep the question sheets. So circle it, make a note on it there, and then come to me afterwards and we'll sort it out in the grading stage. But we can't sort it out on the day in the classroom, unfortunately. Other things I want to say? Yeah. Oh, one other thing that's very important for multiple choice test taking, and particularly economics tests, is that very often, we've only covered a limited number of subjects, right? And so very often there'll be more than one question getting at the same general area of the class, right? Which means if you don't know the answer to a question, if you don't understand a question, circle it, do the rest of the exam, and come back. Very often, somewhere else on the exam will have hints. Right? If you're, the best sort of case for an exam is that, one, it makes you study, and two, you'll learn something by doing it, because you're in a high-stress environment and you sort of, like, your brain focuses on the thing. Maybe you come out smarter than when you went in, and in fact, you can do that. Right? You can be looking at the other questions to give you hints on the first question. That's absolutely okay. One year, there was a question, and I deliberately didn't put any graphs on it, and you're supposed to come up with the graph yourself. And then 2 questions later, there's the graph that you were meant to come up with yourself. I'm not like some kind of question-making genius or anything. There will be almost certainly hints about other questions in the exam. Not intentional, but it's bound to happen. So if you don't know something, circle it, eliminate the answers that you can, think about it a little bit more, you got a hold of time, and then come back to it. And very often it will be a lot clearer coming back. Questions about the exam? Yeah?
Is the sitting going to be like adjusted and fixed and notified to us before class, or is it just like go there and like sit wherever you want?
It's going to be sitting wherever you want, yeah. Some people have for various health reasons and etc. To take it in a smaller room. That's fine. Come to the main room, and then an invigilator will take you to the smaller room. We have things booked up for that sort of situation. Yeah. No, it's closed book. It's a fair question. No, it is a fair question. It's absolutely a fair question. It could even be that a book would make it harder in the sense that where is it in this book? But no, it's closed book. It's closed book. It's basically a third of your grade. So we have 3 hours of exams. Each hour counts about the same. Right? Okay. So materials, everything and up to last week. Nothing that's on this week is on the exam. Unless, of course, people ask questions about stuff, in which case we're referring back to last week. So everything up to. Okay. The Economics Drop-In Center is working this week. Working every week, but this week in particular is relevant to you, so I mentioned it here. You can email Gavin at here, or you can just drop in at these particular times. Money and the interest rates, and I gave you last time sort of a history of money, and that is just to emphasize, first of all, a vague, kind of vaguely truthy discussion about what happened, loads of detail left out, but just to emphasize how really new the situation we are in now. Right? We got 10,000 years more or less of semi-recorded history. It's only been 50 years that we've had money the way that it is now, where it isn't backed by anything real. Where it's just slips of paper. And bad things have happened since then, but nothing horrendous has happened since then. And so we don't know how the system is going to fare. so just to sort of emphasize that we are redefining the word money. Let's go through some things that kind of count as money that in our definition are. Because remember, money is whatever money does, right? And so here's a few things that happen in our society. Cash used to be king when you were young, and I was old. Way back in 1919, and that kind of cash was kind of king. Like, it was the best way to pay for most things. Not so much, but it's clearly cash can be used for money, right? I can accept cash from somebody, safe in the knowledge that most likely I'll be able to pass it on to someone else, right? And they will accept it because they think they can pass it on to someone else, and so on. So it's serving a medium of exchange in our society. But so do checking account balances. In fact, these days, checking account balances are kind of better at being money than cash is. Right? There's lots of places that will let you pay by card that won't let you pay by cash. We just don't have a till, sorry. Right? And so having money in your checking account is actually in many cases easier to spend than the cash. On the other hand, it is harder to buy drugs with the money in your checking account. It's much easier to get, so it varies, right? And this is one thing to notice, that we are going to talk about some things being better at being money than other things, but it's not as simple as that, right? Because for us these days, in the last few years, checking account balances, you putting it on your card or your Apple Pay or whatever, is easier, simpler, and more widely accepted, generally speaking, than cash. So in a sense, checking account balances are better than cash. On the other hand, there are some things that you really want cash for, and checking account balances won't do. Now, of course, in real life, it's easy enough to go to the bank and get some cash for your checking account balances, right? You can swap one against the other, but they're both sort of serving as money. They're both serving as a medium of exchange. If I go out and all I have is money in my checking account and my little card, I can go get a cup of coffee after class, right? No problem, they will accept that. I'll go ping, and I will get a cup of coffee, and magically in their bank account the money will appear, and they're happy to take that because they know they can pass that on to some other sucker. And so that, for us, is going to count as money, having stuff in the checking account. This is a really important step, by the way. The fact that we're counting B as money is going to be crucial for us going forward. So it's not just cash, it's going to be checking account balances as well. Also stocks, if you own part ownership in a company, right? A stock is just a certificate saying that you own part of a company. You can own a stock in IBM, you're a part owner of IBM. A very small part, but nonetheless, a part owner of IBM. These, for most of us, if you have a couple of stocks saying that you own a share of IBM, it's hard to get a cup of coffee after class, right? It is a bit of a pain to get a cup of coffee after class because you go to the coffee shop and say, I have this ownership of IBM, give me a cup of coffee, I'll give you, the people aren't going to do that, right? They're going to look at you weird and it's going to be a whole thing. But on the other hand, you can call up your broker, and you can convert it into checking account balances and then get your cup of coffee. It's going to take you a few hours, it's going to be a pain. But you can do that. Actually, with apps nowadays, you can do it quicker. But nonetheless, it's going to be more of a pain. On the other hand, a lot of big deals happen in stocks. Right? So IBM decides that they want to buy up some little startup company. Well, they're going to pay $300 million in cash and $200 million in stocks. Right? And so they are using, and the company doesn't particularly want those stocks. They just want those stocks. They're going to sell them on, and then they're going to convert them into something else. So it is a medium of exchange. It's just happening because that's what IBM has on hand. It has a whole pile of stocks. It has a little bit of cash. And they put that together, pass it off to these guys, who then pass it off to someone else. So in fact, stocks in large transactions quite often do get used as a medium of exchange. Not for you and me, but for companies trading with each other. Same with bonds. Bonds are just an IOU saying this company or government owes you money. And those get swapped around in just the same way. Okay? Not by you and me, but by these larger entities. Gold can be used as money, right? Some people do swap gold. Mostly here in Ireland, we don't that much. Like if you get gold and you want to convert it into coffee, What you do is you go and you sell it and you get cash, and then you use the cash, so the cash is the medium of exchange, by and large. But gold does get used as money elsewhere. Not lots these days, but some swaps get done in gold. Back in the day, of course, gold was king, right? Gold was the gold standard, if you will. And so you can see that these positions on this list can change, right? Depends on society, depends on what we use in our transaction. It used to be all the transactions were happening in gold, now not so much. But occasionally happens. Comic books are money in our definition, because I know for a fact that when I was 13, kids were swapping around Spider-Man 14s all the time, and you didn't really want a Spider-Man 14, that would be your third one, but you're going to swap it with some other kid, and so it was a medium of exchange. Right? Can be, not often, not for most of us, most of the time, but some people do use them as a medium of exchange. 14-year-old boys mostly, but still, the 14-year-old boys are people. They are. Okay, fine. So in our definition, comic books are money in our society. They're not commonly used the way cash and checking account balances are. And I put this here just to emphasize that there is nothing that is not money. Everything is money, right? Because everything is used as a medium of exchange by some people sometimes. And we haven't even gotten into store of value, right? You can store value in your comic books. You can store actually quite a lot of money in your comic books if you're good at buying. And you can certainly store value in bonds. Cows also be used as swaps even now. So we are going to call all of these money, in a sense, right? In the sense they meet our definition. Right? They meet our definition, they serve the functions of money. It is also interesting to know, I don't know if you're interested, but it is nonetheless interesting, whether you're interested or not. It is interesting to know that some of these things are very good at being a medium of exchange, but less good at being a store of value. Right? If you keep your wealth in cash, well, that's going to become less and less valuable over time with inflation. Prices are going to go up, but you're going to still have the same amount of cash. So it's very good as a medium of exchange, very bad as a store of value. Whereas bonds are a bit of a pain. Only really large transactions can be done with bonds, IOUs from the government. But they store value very well because they pay interest. Right? And so there can be a trade-off, and often is a trade-off, between these various functions of money. Something that's good at one is not necessarily good at the other. We are going to focus on the medium of exchange function of money, right? Because that's what we're going to be interested in primarily. And so we're going to focus on medium of exchange. Medium of exchange is just the thing that makes exchanges easier, right? You can swap things without having a double coincidence at once. And so in my list, more or less into, say, society, things that are a good medium of exchange are kind of towards the top, and things that are a bad medium of exchange are down towards the bottom. In my little biased opinion, in the circles that I travel in. Maybe if I was living on a farm, maybe cows would be farther up there above comic books, maybe even above gold, right? But for me, if I had a cow, all I could think of to do with the cow as quickly as possible convert it into checking account balances. I wouldn't swap it with somebody. But other people are different. People got different lives, they got different friends. So it varies, right? That's just what I said. So what I've done there is I've ordered these things by what's called liquidity. Right? And liquidity is just jargon for being good at the medium of exchange, basically. What it is something that is liquid, is really easy to spend. Right? You think about it, if you liquid it, you hold it in your hands, it runs right through your fingers, just like money. I know. Money just goes through your fingers and you say, where did it go? Just like a liquid. Right? So liquidity, things that are liquid are good at being money. Things that are liquid are easy to get rid of. If you want to convert your wealth into stuff, it's pretty easy to do. Right? If you have a bunch of cows and you want to convert them into a house, that is a problem. You have to find somebody who wants a bunch of cows. You got to get them to market. You got poop everywhere. It's Whereas if you have a checking account balance, you can buy the house in a week, right, and you're done. Right? So these things are easier to spend than these things. So we order things by liquidity. We're going to have various sort of definitions of money, and these are not really definitions, but categories that are help us think about it in an easier way, and that the statistics office kind of keeps track of. Less so these days, by the way, than they used to. But M0, money category 0, M0 are things that are really, really easy to spend. So that's notes and coins. Okay. And then we have M1, things that are very easy to spend, and that's all the things in M0, the notes and coins, plus checking account deposits. Now, this is clearly from the olden days, right? This is, I don't know when they came up with this, but ancient days, like, I don't know, like before I was born, or at least before I went to university, right? So, ancient days, they came up with this. And in the ancient days, that was true, right? Notes and coins were really easy to spend, and checking account balances, not so much so, right? They didn't have ATM machines, or, yeah, when I was a kid, we didn't have ATM machines, this wasn't a thing. Okay. And not everyone would accept your check, right? So you didn't have the card that was paying, you could write a check, it was promised to pay somebody, and some places would take a personal check and some places wouldn't, and you needed 3 pieces of ID. And it was genuinely harder to spend checking account balances than it was to spend notes and coins. I know, ancient days. This is not true anymore, right? Nowadays, it's actually easier to spend your checking account balances than it is to spend notes and coins. Because society has changed. Technology has moved along, society has changed. These are still our categories. It's not very important because nobody has ever cared about M0. It has not been important for us, so we don't worry about that too much. But it is a thing, right? These things are subject to change. Okay. And then M2 are things that are pretty easy to spend. That's M1, so all the checking account balances, all the notes and coins, plus short-term time deposits. Right, so lots of people have, like ordinary people, have money in the bank that they put in for 3 months. Right? You put in the money for 3 months, you get a higher interest rate. If you take it out, you lose the interest earnings. Right? Or some punishment of some sort happens. Or maybe you can't take it all, you have to wait the whole 3 months. Okay, these are short-term time deposits. Not as easy to spend as checking account balances, clearly, but still doable. Like ours, with AIB, you have to wait a week. Right? You say, I want my money out, they say a week later you can get your money. It is harder to get it out than it is checking account balances, but still, if you want to buy a car, it's still possible to buy the car. Right? So even today, these are still harder to spend than checking account balances. And then we got M3, we got your M4, you got your M5, M6, and whatnot. All of them, in someone's judgment, a little harder to spend, a little harder to liquidate than the things above. Now, why do we have this? Well, first of all, we have this because it emphasizes again that we know that in our definition of money, everything is money. But some things are better money than others, right? And depending on the story that we want to tell or the thing that we want to analyze, we want to have some kind of broad money that includes lots of stuff, or we want to have some kind of narrow money that includes very little stuff. So, for example, if my question is, there's going to be some kind of political panic tomorrow. How much are people going to spend in the next 24 hours in anticipation of that? Well, they can't get at their short-term time deposits. So M2 is pretty irrelevant, right? By spending tomorrow, it's only these things that they can use to spend. Right? And so the liquidity that matters is these things, or how much water and toilet paper and stuff they stockpile overnight. Depends on how much they got in their checking accounts and how much they got in cash. Right? But if I'm wondering how much do firms invest over the next 6 months, well, they can very easily get at their short-term time deposits. And so M2 would be more relevant for what their opportunity is to buy stuff over the next 6 months. And so on, right? Depending on the story you're telling. And so the statistics office keeps track of all this stuff. as best I can, how much money is in the economy. Now, these categories, first of all, don't memorize them. Like, I'm not going to ask you what's in M1, what's in M2, but you should know that there are more liquid things and less liquid things. And very importantly, for our class, we are going to be thinking of M1 as money. Okay. So when we say money, we mean notes and coins and checking account balances. And mostly we mean checking account balances. The number of notes and coins are swamped by the amount of that's in checking account balances. Now, these things statistically are becoming less and less relevant over time because technology and the banking system have gotten more accessible to more people, and so it's very easy to spend your money in your checking account. It's very easy to swap things out. We don't track them the way we used to. We tend to track various interest rates a lot more than we track these things, but it's worth having, not because it's sort of super policy relevant, like thinking about these numbers these days, but it is super policy relevant and relevant for our understanding of the world to realize that there's sort of better monies and worse monies, but there's no, this is money and this is not money. That's not a thing, the way we define money. Everything is money, but some things are better at money than others. And importantly for us, in macroeconomics, not just this class, but in macroeconomics, we always want to include checking account deposits. That used to be a little bit harder sell than it is now, but I think most of you, most of the time, are using the cards, right? And so that really is money for you guys, mostly. I don't know how you live your life. Maybe it's all drug deals in the back room. I don't know what you're doing, but you know, you use the cards a lot, right? And so thinking of that as money these days is pretty straightforward. Nonetheless, I'm emphasizing it, even though it's straightforward, because nothing we do from here on in is going to make any sense at all, unless when I say money, you're thinking checking account balances. If you're thinking notes and coins, it's going to be ununderstandable. But if you're thinking checking account balances, it's going to make some sense. And because we're talking about checking account balances, when we're talking about money, if we want to talk about money, we really have to talk about the banking system, right? Because checking account balances are all in banks. And so if that's most of the money that's out there, which it is, then we really have to understand how banks work to talk about money. Just in terms of it being most of the money out there, I don't know what your bank account looks like, but it's kind of irrelevant in the sense that we have whatever our daily life is, you have a feeling for how much gets used in cash and how much gets used in bank, you know, just directly from the bank. Like you can just sort of examine your own life now. How much money do you have in cash? How much do you have in your bank account? And think about your friends, and that gives you sort of a go-to. Think about, in particular, think about your parents and uncles and aunts and stuff, how much they've got to the best of your life. Snoop, like this evening, Snoop, that's your homework. Go snoop and find out how much your uncle has in the bank. Just saying. Now I'm irrelevant. Okay, but that's all a little bit irrelevant, right? Because the vast majority of these checking account balances are not what you and I hold in checking account balances, but they're held by companies. So if you think about Hewlett-Packard, Hewlett-Packard off the lick slip, they've got payroll that they've got to meet every month. Right, so everybody that works at Hewlett-Packard has to be paid. So at the end of the month, they need everybody's paycheck in their bank account. They also have suppliers that need to be paid and contractors that need to be paid. And all these people need to be paid. All that money sits in Hewlett-Packard's bank account. And they probably have a petty cash with 35 euros in it in case Sylvia needs some flowers because she's, you know, got promoted or something. Right? There's a very small petty cash and huge bank account balances in every major business. Very few businesses. Retail has a bunch of cash, but they turn it into bank account balances at the end of every day. Right? So again, payroll is much larger. Vast majority of money is checking account balances. And cash, while it plays some role in our lives, is not super important for any of this. So when we're thinking money, we're really thinking checking account balances. And so we have to be thinking about the banking system. Right. So does a bank work? Okay. So here's how a bank works. Suppose, and this is my little scheme because I have noticed that twice a week I have 250 people come. 250 people come to class, and they're sitting there, and they probably all get hungry, and they all want to buy stuff afterwards. And so it would be really convenient for you guys if there was like a local bank. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to set up the Bank of Ivan. And the Bank of Ivan works like this. I come down here, and I say, who wants to put money in the Bank of Ivan? And everyone says, no, that's ridiculous. And so what I do is I get this place, and I make it all marble. And I get some pillars so I look like I'm old, and then all of a sudden this place looks all fancy and make me some security doors so it looks like I got a security guard standing there like this, and all of a sudden I got cred. And so I got my credibility, and now people are depositing their money. And so you decide you're going to deposit 100 euros in my bank. So you come down, you give me 100 euros, and I write a little slip of paper saying, here, you have 100 euros in the bank. It's basically saying, I owe you 100 euros. That's what your deposit slip does. I owe you 100 euros. And now I've got 100 euros, I put it behind the desk here. This is now marble, right? Be aware. This is marble, so it looks much better. But it's just sort of behind the desk somewhere. I got the 100 euros there. And then, when you want your money, you come and you say, I decided this weekend I want to go out. Can I have 40 euros out of my 100 euros? And I say, sure. And I take 40 euros and I give it to you. And all is well with the world, right? This is what is called 100% reserve banking. That is, when you give me your 100 euros, I keep 100% of it in a reserve under the desk. And then when you ask for your money back, there is absolutely no problem because I kept 100% of it in reserve, so it's easy for me just to give it back. And this, I've fulfilled my promise. You're happy, I've kept it safe under the desk, and life is good. Right? The only downside about this is that I've got expenses. I have to pay for all that marble. I have to pay for that security guard. And in this rate, I'm never going to get a trip to the Bahamas out of this deal. And so I'm making no money. Right? I got expenses, but I got no revenue. So what I need to do is I need to get revenue out of this thing. And so what I do is instead of keeping 100% of it in reserve, I keep a fraction of it in reserve. Fractional reserve banking. Right? And every bank that you know is run on fractional reserve banking. They keep only part of it in reserve, and the rest they loan to somebody to get interest earnings. The only bank that I know of that is on 100% reserve banking is Horace Bank in London, named after the Hoare family. Don't ask. But named after these guys, and it's been around since like the 1300s, and they're banking to aristocrats. And I heard about Horace Bank because an economic historian did a thing about Horace Bank. Like historical bank data. And you go in there, you give them money, and they keep all of it in the safe. And so they can give you it back. And so how do they make a profit? Well, they got various schemes. They say, well, if you want to also invest that money, we got some investment brokers that will help you out. Right? When you put your money in, you have to pay a fee to put it in. It's not like you can put it in for free. You have to pay them to put it in. So you make a bit of money there. And then they have these meetings, and they say, we're going to get our 5 clients together, and we're going to have a round table about investment options, and people do it for networking. It's all these aristocratic sort of folks, and so you go there, and you can see on the website, you look at Horace Bank on the website, you'll see it's very much geared towards getting the rich people together to meet each other. It's like a thing. We sent our daughter to St. Andrews, and the PTA meetings were not about the students. They were all about parents schmoozing with each other. It was ridiculous. It's that sort of thing. But all the other banks, all the banks we know and love, work on fractional reserve banking. So in Ivan's Bank, I'm going to do fractional reserve banking. What I'm going to do is I'm going to keep 50% in reserve. So you give me 100 euros, I put 50 euros under the table, and then I take this other 50 euros and I loan it to somebody for a week. I say, Joe, have this money for a week. At the end of the week, pay me 55 euros. Right? And then we go along. And if all goes well, at the end of the week, I'm going to make 5 euros off this. Right? I'm going to get to keep that money, the extra money that Joe pays. You're gonna pay an interest return. Okay? And so we're going along in the week. I've loaned this 50 euros out to Joe, getting 55 at the end of the week. And then halfway through, you say, you know, I'd really like to go out this weekend. Could I get 40 euros? And I say, sure, of course, it's your money. Of course you can get it. Don't be silly. And I give you 40 euros, and you walk off. And then you're walking off, and you say, you know, actually, there's probably going to be after drinks as well, so maybe let me get another 20 euros. Well, now I'm screwed, right? Because now you've asked for 60 euros, but I only kept 50 euros in reserve. And so now I have to say, I know I promised, but I just don't got it. And so my bank fails. Right? It gets closed down by the banking authorities. It's a whole thing. You lose all your money. Well, you lose 50 euros. That's the amount that I loaned down. Okay. So that's not safe. And I have this problem as a banker. Right? If I don't loan out anything, I'm making a loss. Right? If I keep 100% reserve, I'm perfectly safe, but I'm making a loss. If I loan out 50 euros, I get 5 euros at the end of the week. I get some profit, if everything goes well. If I loan out 90 euros, I get 9 euros at the end of the week. So the more money I loan out, the less I keep in reserve, the bigger my profits are. But the riskier the bank is. Right? If I only loan out 50 euros, you can come and ask for 40, and my bank's still fine. If I loan out 90 euros and you ask for 40, I don't have it. And so there's this trade-off for banks between profitability and riskiness. If they loan out a lot of money, they're very profitable, but very risky. If they loan out only a little bit of money, then they're not as profitable, but less risky. Right? And they have to make this trade-off. And they do that with the amount that they keep in reserves. Also, who they loan money to, and et cetera. But in ours, we're going to focus on the amount that they keep in reserve. Okay. Now, this sounds really crazy, but let's suppose I decide I'm going to keep 10% in reserve. And by the way, 5% is a realistic number, but let me do 10% because the math is easier. Right? I'm going to keep 10% in reserve. So I'm going to loan out 90, and I'm going to keep 10. Well, it's very likely that you are going to want your money in this week, in which case my bank is going to want it. But what happens is it's not just you. I get 10 customers, say. And each of those 10 customers puts in 100 euros. So now I have 1,000 euros in the bank. And I keep 100 in reserve behind the desk, 10%, and I loan out 900. And now, if you come and you say, you know, I've decided to switch schools. I'm not going to play with the economists anymore. I'm going to go into veterinary medicine, and that's way across campus. I don't want this bank account anymore. Can I have all my money? I say, sure, no problem. I've got 100 euros right here. And I'm sweating bullets because that's all the money I have behind the counter. But I can give it to you, and I do it nonchalantly, like I don't even care. It goes with the marble, the attitude. And so that's fine. But if anyone else asks for money, then I have a problem because I don't have anything in reserve anymore. And so as I get more customers, more and more people can get their money out if they want it because they can get it just out of the reserves. But no matter how many customers I have, if there are enough people that want their money out, the bank will fail. It is set up that it is genuinely, by construction, a fragile institution. It is one of those Peter Pan sort of things, Tinkerbell things. Like if you do believe in fairies and you clap your hands, the fairy lives, and if you don't believe in fairies, the fairy dies. If you do believe in banks, the banks survive. If all of a sudden everyone thinks this bank is rubbish, they don't have any money, and gets their money out all at once, the bank will fail. It is kept alive by our belief in the banking system. Okay? But it is fundamentally, like even a well-run bank, like even a perfectly well-run bank, is going to have some of its money in reserves and a large portion of it loaned out to people because that's where the profits come from. So back in the day, can we have this? Is this gonna play? Let's find out. So you know this is Mary Poppins, right? This is the bank running Mary Poppins. They wouldn't give the kid his tuppence, and then all of a sudden, everybody starts getting their money out. was super common. Like this would happen every 3 or 4 years, 5 years. Well, some local set of banks would go under. Everyone would rush to get out their money. It was so common that it became part of popular culture. Right? It's not like they didn't put this in the movie, they didn't put this in the book because it was such a great scene, although it was fun, but because this was an experience that people could relate to. People were aware that banks were fundamentally unstable because they had seen them fall over and over and over again in a way that we haven't seen in our lifetime. Right? It does happen. Banks do fail. Like it's not that they don't. But they don't fail in this way, where there's a giant panic and everyone's lined up and pushing and banging to get into the doors. They don't fail in that way. The only one that did fail in that way was Silicon Valley Bank in 2023. And the interesting thing about Silicon Valley Bank is it was kind of a special bank. It wasn't a bank to you and me, it was a bank to billionaires. It was a bank that was designed to hold the money of these investment capitalist guys. Right? And so they had a couple of features of Silicon Valley Bank that made it different from other banks. So most banks nowadays have deposit insurance, so that if the bank doesn't have the money to pay you back, the central bank will step in and pay you back. Up to a certain amount. I think it's $200,000. But don't quote me. Look up the rules on your bank. Like, don't be putting your $200,000 in on my say-so. But there's some amount that you can have in there that the central bank will step in and bail you out if the bank goes under. Now, that's all well and good for you and me, but it's not so good for Peter Thiel and these billionaire guys who had literally billions in the bank in their checking account deposits. And so when the bank went under, sure, they're going to get their $200,000 back, but the rest of the $10 billion is gone. Right? And so when the rumors happened that this bank was going under, it operated just like this. It was exactly this kind of thing. It was panic among billionaires. Okay, they did it all electronically. They were doing it at home beside their pool, but they really, really freaked out because it wasn't insured. But if we contrast that, if we can, contrast that with another bank failure that was fairly recent. Compared to Northern Rock, which went under in 2007, 2008. And this was Northern Rock, was actually a very well-run bank. There was nothing particularly weird about this bank. But what happened with this bank is it had borrowed lots of money, which was typical of banks, still is typical of banks, and it just had to roll that over. The payments were due, and they just had to borrow more money to pay for that, but it was all in the business plan. Like it wasn't like a surprise or anything. But totally unrelated to them, the US had a financial crisis, and nobody knew what was going on with financial institutions, and so nobody would loan anyone money. It wasn't special to them. Like nobody was loaning any big money to anybody, because until they sort out who's solvent, who's not. And so all of a sudden, Northern Rock couldn't pay back its debts. Right? And so everyone said, oh, Northern Rock's going under, let me get my money out. And partly, of course, they're British. So they line up. But I will also point out that the Mary Poppins people were all British too, and they hit each other with sticks. So it's not just the Britishness, it's the fact that these guys would really like to get their money out of this bank before it goes under. But if it does go under, it's not that big a deal. Within a week or so, the central bank will come and pay them back. And they did, right? With like a week or so, a little bit of paperwork, it was a hassle. Everyone worried a bit, but it wasn't like a big deal. Right? And so in one case, Mary Poppins Day, is the bank went under, you lost your livelihood, right? You lost all your savings. Now you're going to be destitute in your old age. Whereas nowadays, bank goes under, you have a week of paperwork to fill out. Real pain, but it's not life-changing. Right? It's actually kind of a nice dinner party story. Well, you also have the waiting in line for a nice dinner party story as well. So you get 2 dinner party stories out of the whole thing. It's great, right? It's a very different kind of environment, and so there's not the same level of panic in modern bank runs as there were in bank runs in the 20s, for example, when we have Mary Poppins, or from the current billionaires moment. And the difference is deposit insurance. The banks are fundamentally unstable. If we all want our money out at once, the bank will go under. The only reason that the banks can survive with this fractional reserve banking, where they only keep a part of your money in reserve, is that not all of us in daily life want our money at the same time. So you want your money one day, but you leave it in the other day, and vice versa, and they can plan on this, and things go along pretty smoothly. But if for whatever reason, we all decide we want our money out, and we do it all at once, the bank will fail. They're not giving some kid his tuppence, the bank will fail. Modern banks will fail, ancient banks will fail, all the banks will fail if they don't give the kid the tuppence. Okay, so we'll start demands for money next. Okay, I'll see you on Thursday. Quick question.